In the early 1600s, when people believed the Earth was the center of everything, one man dared to question the universe itself. His name was Galileo Galilei, a scientist, philosopher, and rebel thinker who used reason and evidence to challenge centuries of belief. His discoveries didn't just change science, they changed how humanity sees truth. Galileo was born in Pisa, Italy in 1564, the same year Michelangelo died and Shakespeare was born. He grew up in a time when knowledge was controlled by tradition, and questioning the Church's view of the world was almost unthinkable. The accepted belief, based on the teachings of Aristotle and the Catholic Church, was that the Earth sat motionless at the center of the universe, while the sun and planets revolved around it. To most people, that was simply how things were. But Galileo was different. From an early age, he had an obsession with how things moved: the swinging of a pendulum, the rolling of a ball, the fall of an apple. While studying at the University of Pisa, he realized that the world didn't always work the way Aristotle said it did. He started testing ideas through experiments, timing how objects fell, rolling balls down inclined planes, and observing that speed and acceleration followed mathematical patterns. In a world that relied on authority, Galileo relied on observation. By the early 1600s, rumors were spreading about a new invention from the Netherlands, a device that could make distant objects appear close. Galileo didn't just buy one, he built his own. He improved the design again and again, creating a telescope that could magnify 20 times more than the naked eye. Then he turned it to the night sky, and everything changed. Through his telescope, Galileo saw what no human being had ever seen before. He discovered mountains and craters on the moon, proving it wasn't a perfect heavenly sphere. He saw countless stars invisible to the naked eye, expanding the universe far beyond imagination. He observed the moons of Jupiter orbiting the planet, showing that not everything revolved around Earth. And he noticed the phases of Venus, which only made sense if Venus orbited the Sun, not us. The evidence was clear: the Sun, not Earth, was at the center of the solar system. This idea, known as heliocentrism, had been proposed a century earlier by Copernicus, but it was mostly ignored. Galileo's telescope gave it undeniable proof. He published his findings in 1610 in a book called The Starry Messenger, and it caused a storm. People were amazed, fascinated, and terrified. If Galileo was right, then the entire structure of knowledge, philosophy, and even religion would have to be rethought. But not everyone was ready to accept it. The Church saw heliocentrism as a direct challenge to scripture and authority. To them, Galileo wasn't just a scientist, he was a dangerous voice of rebellion. At first, church officials warned him to stop spreading these ideas. Galileo, however, believed that truth discovered through observation couldn't be silenced. He kept writing, kept teaching, and kept arguing that reason and evidence were gifts from God meant to be used. In 1632, he published his most famous work, Dialogue Concerning the Two Chief World Systems. It was written as a conversation between three men, one supporting the old geocentric view, one supporting the new heliocentric model, and one moderating the discussion. But the book clearly favored the heliocentric argument. The Church saw this as mockery, and Galileo was summoned to Rome to face the Inquisition. At his trial in 1633, Galileo was accused of heresy, a crime against faith. The Church demanded that he recant his beliefs. Facing imprisonment or worse, Galileo gave in. He publicly declared that he no longer believed the Earth moved around the Sun. But as the story goes, after whispering the words of surrender, he muttered under his breath, "Eppur si muove," and yet it moves. Whether he actually said it or not, those words came to define his legacy. Even when forced to bow, Galileo's truth stood firm. After the trial, Galileo was placed under house arrest for the rest of his life. He continued to write in secret, studying motion, gravity, and the laws of nature. In his later years, he became almost completely blind, yet his vision of the universe remained clearer than ever. When he died in 1642, the world was still not ready to accept his ideas, but the seeds had already been planted. Within a few generations, scientists like Isaac Newton would build upon Galileo's discoveries, forever changing physics and astronomy. Today, Galileo is often called the father of modern science. He introduced the idea that knowledge should come from experiments, evidence, and observation, not from tradition or authority. He proved that even the most powerful institutions can be wrong, and he reminded the world that truth doesn't bend to belief. What made Galileo special wasn't just his discoveries, it was his courage to question what everyone else accepted as fact. He lived in a time when disagreeing with the church could cost you everything, your career, your freedom, even your life. But Galileo believed that the universe didn't need permission to be understood. It only needed someone brave enough to look through the lens. Centuries later, his story still feels relevant, because in every generation there are new Galileos, people who challenge what's normal, who question systems built on comfort and control. Galileo's telescope wasn't just a tool to see the stars, it was a symbol of human curiosity, of the need to ask why, even when it's dangerous to do so. When you look up at the night sky, remember that everything we know about it, the planets, the stars, the vastness of space, all began with one man daring to point a telescope upward and say, "What if we've been wrong?" Galileo didn't just change astronomy, he changed the very definition of truth.